Little Johnny works as a concrete finisher, and he wasn't feeling so well one day, and he called in sick for work. His boss says, "Oh, little Johnny," he says, "we put this driveway off for the last couple of weeks, and I told them they'd have it in today." He says, "I don't know, boss, I'm just not feeling so well." He says, "Well, you know what I do when I'm not feeling well in the morning?" He says, "I have sex with my wife, and then after that, I feel great for the rest of the day." He says, "Why don't you try that out?" Little Johnny says, "All right, I'm willing to try anything." So a couple hours later, little Johnny calls in. He says, "You're right, boss. I did what you told me to, and it was great, and I feel great. And by the way, you have a really nice house." One day, little Johnny's dad went and bought a robot that smacks people when they're lying. He decided to try it at the dinner table. He said, "Little Johnny, what'd you do today?" He said, "Dad, all I did today was homework." And the robot smacks little Johnny. He says, okay, I was watching a movie." His dad says, "Well, what movie were you watching?" He says, "I was watching Shrek." And the robot smacks him again. He says, I'm sorry, I was watching a rated R movie." His dad says, "I'm appalled. When I was your age, I didn't even know what a rated R movie was." The robot smacks his dad. And his mom smiles and says, "He sure is your son." And the robot smacks his mom. One day, little Johnny rides his horse into town and goes to the bar. He hops off his horse, goes and hooks it up to the hitching post, walks behind the horse, lifts up its tail, and kisses it right in the ass. Then he walks into the bar. There's this old man sitting across the street, sees this, and he thinks it's the most strangest thing. So he goes over to the bar, finds little Johnny, and says, "Hey, did I just witness you kissing your horse's ass?" Little Johnny says, "Yeah, you did." The guy says, "You mind telling me why?" Little Johnny says, "Well, you see, I got chapped lips." The guy says, "And kissing a horse's ass is going to cure that?" Little Johnny says, "No, but it sure as hell is going to keep me from licking them." Little Johnny and little Susie had been married for many years. At the ripe old age of 92, little Johnny up and dies. Little Susie decides, I can't take it without my little Johnny. I can't live without him. So she decides that night that she's going to take her own life. So she calls up the doctor and says, "Doc, you got to help me. Where is the exact location of my heart?" The doctor says, "Well, it's approximately 2 inches below your left nipple." Little Susie says, "Thank you," and she hangs up. She takes the gun, and it was that evening that little Susie was admitted to the hospital for shooting out her left knee. The teacher says, "Okay, class, today I'm going to describe a few professions, and I want you to tell me which ones they are." The first one is someone that builds houses. Little Susie raises her hand, and she says, "A carpenter." Teacher says, "That's great, little Susie." The second one is someone that works on and fixes cars. Well, little Billy raises his hand. He says, "A mechanic." Teacher says, "Oh, that's great, little Billy." The third one is someone that is on TV and talks about the news. Little Timmy raises his hand. He says, "I'm a reporter." Teacher says, "That's correct." And the last one is a person that keeps on talking when people are no longer interested. Little Johnny raises his hand and he says, "A teacher." Little Johnny went to Best Buy for an interview on a sales position. Well, at the end of the interview, the manager says, "Wow, you've done really well so far." He says, "I've got one last thing." And he pushes a laptop across the table and he says, "I want to see how good your selling skills are, and I want you to try and sell this laptop to me." Well, Johnny says, "Okay." He picks up the laptop and he walks out of the store. Well, about an hour goes by. The manager calls him up and says, "I want you to bring that laptop back to me right now." Little Johnny smiles and says, "Okay, $350 and it's yours." One day, little Johnny joins a nudist colony and tells his parents about it. And his parents says, "Oh, I don't believe you." His mom says, "Send me a picture." So he sends his mom a picture of his top half. About a week goes by and little Johnny's grandma sends him a letter and says, "Little Johnny, I haven't had a picture of you in a very long time. Would you send me one?" So without thinking, he accidentally sends a picture of his bottom half. Well, 3 weeks go by and his grandma writes him another letter and says, "You know, little Johnny, I don't like your haircut. It makes your nose look too big." Little Johnny had went off to college and was in freshman orientation where the dean of students was addressing the kids. He says, "All right, kids, we need to get one thing straight. The female dormitory is off limits to the males and the male dormitory is off limits to the females. If you decide that you're going to break these rules, your first offense is going to cost you $50. And if you try a second time to go in the opposite sex's dormitory, your offense will go up to $100. And if it just so happens that you try a third time to sneak your way into the opposite sex's dormitories, Your fence will cost you $200. To which little Johnny raises his hand and says, how much for a season pass? It was summer vacation and little Johnny was looking to get some extra money, so he went up to the wealthy neighborhoods and started knocking on doors. I went to the first house and he says, hey, I'm a handyman. Is there any jobs that you'd like me to do? Guy says, yeah, you could paint my porch. He says, how much would you charge? Little Johnny says, I don't know, $50. Guy says, okay, you got some painting supplies in the garage and there's some paint in there. You could grab that. So little Johnny leaves and the guy's wife says, does he know that our porch goes all the way around to the back? The guy says, he must. He was standing on it. So little Johnny comes back less than an hour later. Says, I'm here to collect my $50. He says, and I got some paint left over. He says, by the way, that's a Ferrari, not a porch. Little Johnny was working at an auto parts store, and this guy came in and noticed his dog laying down in front of the parts counter. He says, oh, that's a cute dog. He says, does your dog bite? Little Johnny says, no, my dog doesn't bite. So the guy bends down to pet the dog, and the dog viciously attacks him. The guy says, what? I thought you said your dog didn't bite. Little Johnny says, yeah, my dog doesn't bite, but that's not my dog. Little Johnny and his best friend Tony went off to Vegas for little Johnny's 21st birthday. Well, around 1 in the morning, Tony says, I'm getting kind of tired. I'm going to head off to bed. Little Johnny says, well, I'll be down in a couple hours. I'm doing pretty good on these slots. So about 4 in the morning, little Johnny goes and opens up the door to the hotel room and walks inside. And Tony sits up. He says, oh, my gosh, how'd you get that black eye? He said, well, when I was getting on the elevator, this beautiful woman walked on with some big boobs. And she said, press 1, please. And so I did. And the next thing I remember is waking up on the elevator floor. Hey, John, want to hear a joke?
Yep.
Little Johnny walks into the police station looking to get a job. He talks to the lieutenant. He says to him, all right, you want a job as a police officer? Little Johnny says, I sure do. He says, okay, what's 4 times 4? Little Johnny says, 16. He says, all right, good. He says, what's the square root of 100? Little Johnny says, 10. He says, well, that's pretty good. He says, who killed Abraham Lincoln? He says, I don't know. He says, all right, well, you can go home and think about it. Johnny says, all right, I'll let you know tomorrow. So he calls up one of his friends, and his friend said, did you get the job? He says, not only did I get the job, that lieutenant's got me working on a murder case. Little Johnny had just gotten a job as a vacuum cleaner salesman. His first day on the job, he goes and knocks on this door. The lady opens the door, and he barges on in without even saying a word. Walks into her living room, takes this bag of cow poop, dumps it right on the floor. She opens her mouth like, he says, before you say anything, I'm going to clean up this pile of cow poop with this vacuum cleaner, and I promise to get it cleaner than it was before I step foot in here, or I will eat this entire pile. She goes to the kitchen and grabs a fork and some ketchup and says, here you go, enjoy. He says, well, what do you mean? She says, that's going to be impossible. I just moved in here today, and I don't have any electricity. Little Johnny goes to this college party and notices this beautiful woman walk in. He goes and grabs a couple of beers and starts drinking and looks across the room, and she's kind of looking at him. So he kind of walks on over there and he says, hi, I noticed that you were looking at me. He says, what's your name? And she says, my name's Carmen. He says, oh, that's a beautiful name. She says, yeah, I gave it to myself. He says, really? She says, yeah, the 2 things I love most, cars and men. She says, what's your name? Little Johnny looks away and looks back, and he says, hi, nice to meet you. My name's BJ Titzengolf. Hey, John, want to hear a joke?
Yep.
So little Johnny pushes his car into this mechanic shop, and he says, it's dead. I don't know what to do. So the guy looks at it, and within a couple of minutes, he's got it idling pretty. He says, so what's the story? Guy says, just crap in the carburetor. He says, okay, well, how often do I have to do that? Teacher asked the kids, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Little Timmy raises his hand. He says, I want to be a baker. Teacher says, that's good, little Timmy. Little Billy raises his hand. He says, I want to be a police officer. Teacher says, that's really good, little Billy. Little Jimmy raises his hand. He says, I want to be a chiropractor. She says, oh, that's awesome. And little Susie raises her hand. She says, I want to be a good mother. She says, oh, little Susie, that's nice. Little Johnny raises his hand. He says, I want to help little Susie become a mother.